Chapter 16. Dr. Varys stood on a large terrace outside of Varick Pharmaceuticals, talking with Dr. Solaris. As they continued their conversation while waiting for the investor meeting to start, Solaris noticed Varys's eyes periodically shift toward the growing assembly. The mix of attendees included investors, journalists, medical technicians, and freelance researchers. To say this was a nerve-bending audience would be an understatement, so any of Dr. Varys's well-contained anxiety starting to surface was understandable to her colleague. "Don't worry, you will be fine," Solaris said reassuringly. Varys blushed slightly. "Oh, God! Does it show?" "Only to those who know you well," she replied with a warm smile. Dr. Varys looked down contemplatively while responding. "You also know how vital this is to our survival, and to think we were on the bleeding edge a few years ago, and now it's like any slight misstep threatens that position." Varys looked back up, to be greeted by a slightly disapproving look from her friend and colleague. "That's your father talking. I know you, and it was never about being on top. It was about helping people and saving lives, and with the exception of the Avatar, no one has done that more than you." Dr. Solaris's stern face grew into one of obvious pride and admiration for Varys. However, before she could reply to her friend's endearing comments, the podium mic sprang to life with a hiss of feedback, and the moderator stepped up to the podium and began speaking. "Thank you all for making it out to this monumental peek behind the curtain of just a few of the new advancements made here at Varick Pharmaceuticals." He paused for a brief round of clapping before continuing his announcement. "Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, due to health and safety restrictions, we can't take everyone on the tour, but those privy few who will be joining us should already have their passes. As for the rest of you, I assure you, you won't miss a thing." He gestured to the left of the stage, where a large, flat monitor was being wheeled out by a couple of stagehands. "You will all be able to watch the tour on this monitor, and any questions you may have will kindly be answered by the renowned doctors Kiri and Lei Song. Afterward, Dr. Varys will join us all here for a final Q&A. Now, if those of you with passes will follow me while the rest of you remain seated and enjoy this live tour of Varick Pharmaceuticals, the future of medicine." Those in their seats started clapping, while the few selected for the tour made their way toward the moderator and Dr. Varys. Once everyone was there, Varys stepped forward and took control of the tour group. As she started guiding them forward through the doors leading into the lobby, the designated cameraman shuffled forward with his tiny handheld device to make sure no one was between him and Dr. Varys. She guided the group through the lobby and began her tour with a brief history of the company. "As most of you know, I started Varick Pharmaceuticals 8 years ago, using my half of Varick Industries to start this sister company. Nearly giving my father a heart attack in the process," she added playfully. A few chuckles broke out in the group, and Varys continued her tour. "I can't lie, the first year was rough, to say the least, but thanks to the help of such amazing doctors as Dr. Solaris here, Dr. Lei Song, and my sister Dr. Kiri." She gestured to the two outside on the terrace. "We were able to turn Varick Pharmaceuticals into what you see today." Varys spread her arms as she turned and looked up. The tour group followed her gaze as they drank in the impressive facilities. Afterward, they made their way out of the lobby and into a section marked R&D. They followed Dr. Varys into a room with a large tinted window and a sleek operating console beneath it. The window faced a plain-looking room with the exception of the walls that were covered in concave circles, good for reverberating sound. A lone pad lay near the center of the room in front of a table with a glass of water, a piece of metal, a couple of rocks, and a container of sand on it. Dr. Varys stepped up to the console and began speaking into a small mic atop the unit. I'm ready for the first volunteer." A moment later, Kauna stepped into the other room, followed by a broad-shouldered man. She directed him to the pad, which he then stepped on with his bare feet. Varys hit a button on the console, and it hummed to life. The tint on the window darkened even more until its transparency was completely lost. She adjusted a small lever and addressed the group. "What you are about to see is the same room, but seen completely through sound, or seismic sense. It is then processed visually through this two-way monitor." "Wait, don't we need to stomp on the ground or something to generate a sound first?" a member of the group inquired. Though imperceptible, micro-vibrations are already traveling through the walls of the test chamber. Once they traverse the room and return to the sensors positioned on the monitor, she gestured to the quartet of tiny sensors adorning each corner of the display. "The data will be processed and visually rendered on the view screen." As if on cue, a perplexing image began to materialize on the monitor, eliciting stunned gasps from several in the group as the semi-translucent silhouettes of the two individuals in the test room appeared before them. Kauna and the man's figures were transformed into a vexing visage of two skeletal forms, shrouded in a faint veil of flesh. Moreover, movements within their bodies could be observed, most notably the rhythmic rise and fall of their rib cages as they breathed. What we are seeing now is called the seismic sensor, invented by Dr. Lei Song. As you can see, the micro-vibrations being picked up from the sensors can go through everything in the body except bone. However, this is just the first layer of the neuro-lens. Varys turned back to the console and pushed another button while adjusting a dial, causing the image on the screen to change further. Now, the man's organs and vascular system started to come into focus, leaving nothing to the imagination of what exactly was going on in the volunteer's body, including what his last meal consisted of. However, the skeletal image of Kauna stayed the same. This second layer is something Dr. Kiri and I have been working on called the hydrosensor. The image now shows data collected not only from the micro-vibrations generated by the seismic sensor, but also by sensors reading the moisture in the volunteer's body. Another group member inquired, "I don't see any sensors." "They are inside the pad the volunteer is standing on, and the sensitivity is controlled by this dial gauge," she said, motioning to the gauge she adjusted earlier. Varys was slightly relieved to see some members in the group give nods of approval and a few taking notes. She pushed a button on the console, and a small portion of the floor in the test room slowly rose a few feet. The carbon silhouette of Kauna walked over to the ascended section of the floor and pulled out two small circular devices which she placed on the man's chest and temple. Dr. Varys excitedly announced, "And now for the third and final piece of the puzzle." She pushed another button and slowly adjusted a knob on the console. The image of the man changed a third time, showing even more detail. Along with his skeletal, digestive, and vascular system, there was now what looked like a lightning storm, shooting through the volunteer's body and culminating in various parts of his brain. Through the synaptic sensors, we can now see the central nervous system, and with that, we are ready to begin. Varys leaned towards the mic. "Begin the demonstration." The now fully transparent volunteer in the other room raised a hand, and a small flicker of light began emanating from the back of the man's all-too-visible brain. The light exploded like a tiny firecracker, emitting a blue glow that coursed through his body and out to his extended hand. Once the light exceeded his reach, vanishing from sight, the water in the cup began to rise and solidify into a ball of ice that he then brought to rest in his right hand. The blue glow emanating from inside the man immediately grew dim. Dr. Varys addressed the group. "The neurolens allows us to see bending on a physiological level. The light we just saw was chi energy. It started here in the parietal lobe." She pointed to the monitor, where a magnified image of the man's brain was shown. The volunteer began to melt the ice and make it into a water whip that he tossed back and forth. As before, similar light, or energy, built up inside the man's parietal lobe before coursing through his body. Varys spoke with an air of intrigue. However, this isn't to say that the parietal lobe is where all bending originates, as our next volunteer will demonstrate. She activated the mic. Proceed with the next volunteer. The first part of the demonstration was met with less enthusiasm than Varys would have preferred. Kauna removed the synaptic sensors from the waterbender and escorted him out. Surprise touched her features when she saw the second volunteer step up. Lu-chan walked in, and after looking a little self-conscious, perhaps due to the size difference between him and the first volunteer, slowly stepped onto the pad. Kauna proceeded to put the sensors on his temple and chest, pretending not to see him blush as she did the latter. She then stepped away and gave a quick nod to Varys in the control room. "Begin the second demonstration," Dr. Varys announced into the mic. Lu-chan took a breath, and as he did, a similar light appeared in his brain. However, unlike the first volunteer, Lu-chan's light began in his brainstem, glowing brighter with the depth of his breathing until traveling out to his hand, where it emerged as a small fire torch. One of the people on the tour yawned noticeably, and the sentiment seemed to spread. "Dr. Varys, if I may, your presentation is visually stunning, I grant you, but theatrics aside, I fail to see the point of all this. I mean, if this is just for benders, who are less than half the population, what purpose does this serve for the rest of us?" Well, what we're seeing are three of the aspects of metaphysics: essence, matter, and spirit, and with these, I believe we can reach the fourth, truth. "Sounds like spiritual mumbo-jumbo to me," someone in the group replied, causing the rest to chuckle. Another member asked, "What truth?" Slumping her shoulders, Varys addressed the group. "Okay, to the point then." She reached for the mic. "Send in the last volunteer." Both Kauna and Lu-chan looked a little caught off by the sudden end of his demonstration. Kauna, however, quickly recovered, escorted him out, and went to get the last volunteer. Varys shut down the monitor, and it went back to its normal transparency. She then waited, but the short time in between seemed an eternity to Varys, who had to listen to the impatient whispers of the tour group behind her. However, a moment later, Varys had the eminent satisfaction of hearing all their whispers simultaneously fall silent when Kauna brought in the last volunteer, Avatar Korra. Chapter 17. Kauna moved out of the way, allowing a silver-haired Korra to approach the center of the examination room. Despite her face showing signs of age from over 7 decades, her stride was full of strength. Varys switched on the microphone and warmly thanked the Avatar for her presence, but was quickly cut off by Korra. "No, Dr. Varys, I should be thanking you for this opportunity." Varys waved away her thanks and continued, "If you have any questions before we start, feel free to ask." "No, I'm just eager to see if it works and learn if she's still—" Her voice faded as a wave of apprehension and uncertainty washed over her aged features. Varys reassured her, "Don't worry, Korra. You'll be reunited with her very soon." Varys gave Kauna a nod, prompting her to fetch the synaptic sensors and place one on Korra's temple before handing her the other to attach to her chest. Once everything was prepared, Kauna left while Varys started up the neuro lens. The massive monitor came alive as sensor by sensor the image of Avatar Korra was replaced with a tapestry of veins and nerves. As Kauna joined the others in the control room, she handed out protective eyewear to everyone present, finishing with her mother. Varys announced, "I'll start at the lowest sensitivity level for each sensor as a precaution against a potential overload." With Korra giving a nod of readiness, Varys watched as the monitor readings gradually rose until an intense flash forced everyone to shield their eyes despite wearing protective gear. As the dazzling light subsided, Varys checked the monitor again and adjusted its opacity for a more comfortable viewing. Mesmerized by Korra's brain scan, Kauna observed how it pulsed with chi energy throughout, everywhere except for in the frontal lobe. Uninterested in chi energy, Varys looked for any indications of life other than Korra's. Initially, her search was fruitless, but after adjusting the neuro-lens, she glimpsed a faint, diamond-shaped glimmer inside of Korra. Hopeful, Varys magnified the image and started recording. Meanwhile, Kauna, still intrigued by Korra's synaptic patterns, saved them to the computer's record log. Moments later, Korra closed her radiant eyes as the glowing light receded back within her. A smile appeared on Varys's face. Korra inquired eagerly, "Did it work? Did you see her?" "Take a look for yourself." Pressing a button, Varys let Korra view the playback of the recorded footage, continuously looping on both sides of the monitor. As Korra stared at the fragile diamond-shaped pulse of light within her chest, her eyes filled with tears. Gently holding the spot from which the light emerged, she murmured tenderly to herself, "Rava." Dr. Varys stepped outside with a heavy heart, followed by Avatar Korra, Dr. Solaris, and the rest of the tour group. A moment later, Kauna emerged, joining her mom near the podium. They faced a crowd of skeptical investors and sharp-tongued journalists, all eager to criticize her vision and leadership. Varys resolutely stepped up to the podium. "I understand that as investors, you may be concerned about our efforts in helping Avatar Korra reconnect with her past lives. I realize that there may be limited financial gains in this pursuit, but I believe it is of great spiritual importance for the world," she explained, her tone both passionate and earnest. An investor raised his voice and questioned, "Are we expected to sacrifice our profits for something so abstract?" Dr. Varys replied sympathetically, "The Avatar has protected and guided our world for thousands of years. As a culture, people have relied on their wisdom to maintain the balance between nations, spirits, and our two realms. My work here at Varric Pharmaceuticals is not just about profit, it's about helping people." She glanced at Solaris, who nodded approvingly before continuing, "And who deserves that help more than our Avatar?" More scoffs and murmurs arose from the crowd. Avatar Korra stepped up to support her respected friend. "Dr. Varys isn't just doing this for me, she is doing it to preserve an essential part of our world's spiritual balance. Like me or hate me, the Avatar is a part of that balance, and I fear for the next reincarnation. If I can't find a way to reconnect with my past lives, that loss will be felt by all the following avatars, and the world too." The group seemed a tad more receptive as they mulled over Korra's words. Kauna, however, took this moment to step up to the podium and give them more to mull over. And what if there was another option? What if we could use this groundbreaking technology to give bending abilities to non-benders? Think of the impact it could have on their lives, or how our company would benefit financially. Kauna's eyes were alight with unchecked zeal as her mother looked at her disapprovingly. The group of journalists and investors, however, looked at her like she was giving away gold. Someone in the crowd boomed with excitement. "Is that possible?" She confidently responded, "Were you not watching the demonstration today? What you witnessed was the biochemical and electrochemical ballet that takes place in each and every one of us." Kiri squirmed as she usurped her metaphor before going on. "Those chemical processes were invisible to us until now. Furthermore, those processes determine whether a gene is active or dormant." A journalist piped up, mic in hand. "So what are you saying? You can just turn on those genes like a light switch?" Kauna smiled. "I'm sure that with some more diligent research and Some generous funding, she added brashly. That's exactly what we will be able to do. An investor jumped at the idea immediately. Imagine the endless possibilities and the financial rewards this could bring. We cannot ignore such a lucrative opportunity. A conflicted Varys watched as her daughter managed to turn the tide and rekindle investor sentiment while indirectly challenging her leadership in the process. Behind Kauna, concern etched the features of the elder Avatar. She stepped forward and addressed the crowd once more, her voice firm and determined. It is true that bending abilities have the potential to change lives, but they also require training and discipline to wield such power. Those who are born with bending talents spend years honing them and learning to control them. Suddenly, granting this power to those unprepared could lead to chaos and imbalance in our world. Dr. Varys nodded in agreement, adding, "While my daughter's idea may seem enticing from a profit standpoint, we must consider the moral implications and long-term effects on society. Our mission here should not be blinded by greed." She paused, locking eyes with her daughter, urging her to relent. Kauna spoke up again, this time voicing a compromise. "Let me ask you this. Isn't there value in both endeavors? While I agree it would be nice to help the Avatar reconnect with her past, we must also consider this company's future, and my proposal would ensure it. Besides, nothing prevents us from working on both fronts." Kauna's ambitions were spreading like wildfire. Any chance Varys had to corral this contagion of cavalier zeal and give voice to caution was quickly slipping away. Most of the investors were all but foaming at the mouth over her daughter's lofty promises. "We'll need even more funding for these dual ventures," one investor mused aloud, prompting hesitant nods from his peers. Dr. Varys looked toward the Avatar, concern evident on her face. "Korra, what do you think?" The aged Avatar looked down with a sigh before responding, "I think life is full of compromise." Her eyes met Varys before adding, "I'm not happy about your daughter's idea, but if we don't pursue both paths, we may find ourselves with no path at all." She gestured to the investors, whose disapproval could usher in a regime change, one that would most likely see Kauna put in charge of the company's future. The crowd of onlookers watched with satisfied expressions. One man, however, watched with tempered malice as he took pictures of Varys and Korra. As his lens shifted to Kauna, a glint of curiosity crossed his features. After snapping a few pictures, he gave her one last look of intrigue before silently secluding himself from the crowd. Dressed like one of the successful investors, only Gan knew of the tattoo on his back, concealed by opulent draperies, a tattoo bearing the mask of a man. Chapter 18. Inside Varick Pharmaceuticals, Lei Song, Solaris, and Kyrie watched the heated discussion inside the conference room. From outside, they saw Varys move with animated gestures as Kauna kept a defensive posture. Korra frowned while addressing the young woman with a concerned look. Solaris asked Lei Song for insight into the conversation. "So, can you hear or sense what's going on in there?" Lei Song chuckled nervously. "Seismic sense doesn't work in this building, I'm afraid. The hydro network running through the floors and walls muffles the ability. However, I think we all can sense what's going on." The pair heard Kiri hang up a phone before approaching them from a nearby desk. "Well, that should make things interesting." The duo looked toward her for elaboration. "That was my sister Umi. She said my dad has been getting calls from worried investors ever since the presentation ended. It sounds like they want to put the matter to a vote." The trio exchanged worried glances. "It makes sense. We don't exactly have the resources to pursue both endeavors at once," Lei Song admitted. As the three mulled over the situation, they saw Varys's secretary nervously approach the conference room. Kiri voiced what they all were thinking. "Uh-oh, here we go." Inside the conference room, tensions were high. Varys felt betrayed by her daughter and wasn't shy to express it. I can't believe you would stab me in the back like that. Stab you in the back? I just saved you and the company, Corner protested. Your proposal was crashing and burning, just like Gramps predicted. I just stepped in before they took their investments somewhere else. Cora stepped forward with an imploring look. I'm sorry. I don't want to come between you two. She softened her voice, focusing on Kauna. I know I'm not an investor, but I believe in the work your mother is doing. However, I'm fearful of the goal you're pursuing. After I unlocked the spirit portals, non-benders became airbenders overnight. It led to people hurting others by accident, while some used that power for their own gain. The young woman interjected, it also led to the rebirth of the air nomads. The Avatar nodded. Yes, but it came at a high cost. World leaders were killed, and a lot of people were hurt. Varys stepped up. Hun, we are just urging caution. But you were right earlier. We can pursue both. I just think your research in genetics and awakening dormant genes should take a back seat. We need to focus on Cora's connection to her past lives. She looked at her mother, understanding, slowly caressing her countenance when there was a knock at the door. Sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Varrick is on the phone. The secretary informed her. Varys stepped out and headed to a nearby office to take the call. Are you trying to send me to an early grave? Varys held the phone away from her ear as her dad continued to yell. Like I don't have enough on my plate with your mom leaving me alone to help our misfortunate airbender friends in their time of need. Bolin headed back south to tend to Varrick Industries, leaving me with Mei Lee stuck to my wallet like an elbow leech. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Varys could hear her sister in the background. My modeling offers will come in any day now. I'll be richer than you. Varrick scoffed. Ha! Now I have to deal with a barrage of angry investors calling me because apparently you've taken the stock price to another seemingly unrecoverable low. Varys tried to reassure him, but, her father continued, do you know one of our investors pulled his money? He said he would rather invest in Cabbage Corp. Honest to Rava. Cabbage Corp. She couldn't help but pull the phone away as Varrick went from a fit of screaming to one of coughing. Mei Lee, you're living in my house for free. The least you can do is get me a drink. Varys tried to soothe her father. Dad, don't get yourself so worked up. I know things look bad right now, but... Her father quickly interrupted. Bad? This is worse than the time I let your sister open her juice bar in the cafeteria of Varrick Industries. The youngest sibling responded, Hey, I made 40 copper pieces that day. Varrick quickly yelled back, You didn't tell me you were selling cactus juice. I lost millions that day in damages and factory recalls. Mei Lee replied aloofly, Whatever. Here I brought you some water. You're welcome. There better not be any cactus juice in this, her father jested, before addressing Varys again. I don't want to hear another word. I want you to listen. This is what's going to happen now. As she listened, her expression and posture slumped deeper and deeper in defeat. Kiri and the other co-creators of the NeuroLens had joined Korra in discussing the merit of Kauna's proposal and the need for caution. Varys re-entered the room with a sluggishness that suggested the long night had finally caught up with her. Lei Song was the first to notice her sour demeanor. Is everything all right? He asked with calm concern. Everyone looked at Varys as she slowly began to respond. Well, it seems the priorities of Varrick Pharma have changed. She sighed before looking at Korra. I'm sorry, but it seems our project will now be the one taking a back seat. My father and the rest of our investors believe pursuing my daughter's idea will be the best way to move forward. Corna smiled before calming herself, addressing the Avatar as she slowly made her way to the head of the conference table. I'm sorry, Korra. Believe me, I want to help. But if this company loses its funding, we won't be able to help you or anyone else for that matter. She tried to take a seat, but obviously struggled with her equilibrium, grasping awkwardly for a chair that was nowhere near her reach. Ignoring the episode, she continued, "So, for now, we focus on using the neurolens for something more profitable. Then, we circle back to helping you reconnect with your past lives." Varys looked apologetically toward the Avatar, while Lei Song glared at Kauna, sensing a lack of sincerity that even the Hydro Network couldn't muffle. Korra spoke up, disheartened but not dejected. "I just appreciate all of you giving me the chance to correct one of my biggest failures as the Avatar. I hope you can help me mend that mistake someday, but I admit that hope is a selfish one. In the end, what's done is done. I just wish there was a way I could tell the next Avatar how sorry I am." Varys and Solaris walked over to Korra, consoling her. Lei Song looked down in solemn contemplation, while Kauna, finally managing to take a seat, tried her best to suppress a smile.